as our 21 online Zoom visitors, a very warm welcome to you too. And we're delighted to have with us tonight Dr. Tyrone Bowes, and this talk's entitled Rewriting the History of Ulster Using Commercial Ancestral DNA Testing. Tyrone holds a doctorate in neuroimmunology. And you've given that up, I understand.
I have, yeah. So that was about 10 years ago.
And you're concentrating now on DNA.
Yeah, this is my focus.
Genealogy.
That's it, exactly.
I don't know whether you know or not, but many of the members here have, done their DNA testing. I haven't, I'm afraid of it, but you never know what it will throw up. But anyway, Tyrone has brought with him two maps, which we have spectacularly failed to get stuck on the wall. One showing Scottish surnames and the other showing, is that a All Irish? That's showing Irish surnames. So they'll be available at the end for your perusal. And in the meantime, we hope we're ready to go, John, are we? That's great. So I'll leave it to you, Tyrone.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that introduction. So just a bit of background for myself. So I was born in Dublin. Now, my interest was initially in surnames. So I'm a biologist, but when I was 11, I got interested in surnames. So I studied biology, chemistry, DIT, and got a distinction in biology. I then went on to Paisley University, first class honours degree in biotechnology, and then my PhD in Southern General and Glasgow Caledonian University. So I spent a lot of time in Scotland. I quite like Scotland. I did a postdoc Scotland in Dundee, came back to Ireland, second postdoc, and senior scientist in NUIG, so about, I think it was 2010, so 2004 to 2010. At that point, right, I'd survived sort of 2 rounds of culling, when the research is expensive and funding dries up in a recession. So I was pretty, my skill set was pretty focused. So there was only a few jobs I could do in the world. And I thought, this is just, I had a family by then, I thought this is just too precarious. So I started Irish and Scottish Origins purely because at that stage, I'd been looking at these DNA test results and I'd seen patterns coming. And I realized I could work with these commercial DNA test results. So I launched those 2 websites, 2011, then there's English Origins, 2012. I had planned the Welsh Origins, but Welsh DNA is a lot more complicated. Welsh surnames are a bit of a nightmare. So I should stress I'm not affiliated with any DNA testing companies or universities. So what you see here is what you see in this presentation is stuff I've discovered. So if you go on the next slide. So this is me at 11 years of age. So this is my sort of when I get interested in surnames. So this is my hometown, Ballymun. It's a bit of a rough place. The 80s, not a great place. This is Brady's van here. Amazing what you catch on the internet. That's actually my brother. 2 brothers over here on the left. So the only time I ever seen these guys animated was when we had a teacher in and he was telling us about surnames. And the kids were going crazy for this. He'd be calling out, asking surnames, and the teacher would give a history, and the kids were loving it. They were lapping it up. But this guy here shouted out my name, Bowes. And the teacher was silent, and teachers don't like silence because it looks as if they don't know anything. So he came up, so he was quick thinking, a couple of seconds passed, and he said, that's bows and arrows. And from 11 years of age, I was like, right, that's too simple. I just didn't believe that. I thought, he's making that up. He obviously did. But from age 11, I was obsessed with surnames. So if you just click there, I remember most of the surnames of these guys.
Yeah, just click it.
Yeah, and here you go. So if you look at it here, it's a bit of a mix. It's maybe Kinch here, that's a sort of Isle of Man surname. It's probably the most unusual. But it's a mix of surnames, mostly Gaelic Irish and Norman. Now, I was obsessed with surnames, so I was like, you know, where does Bowes fit in this? I had it as a Norman surname. So if you go next slide there. So I have to stress here now that I don't really have an interest in traditional paper trail genealogy. Now, the furthest I get in my paternal line, my Bowes ancestors, is my great-grandfather. And this is really, really unusual because he dies on the 12th of August at 4 a.m. and he's shot in the head. And I know exactly when he dies. I know where he dies. I know where they bury him. You can see here, we buried Bowes in a disused trench behind our line. Literally here, because I could see all the platoons. I know the platoons, so I know exactly. And this guy had, on that particular day, he drew a map of this is huge crater. So that's still there in Belgium, in Ypres. And you can actually go to the crater. So I can see, or I know precisely where he was buried. But if you click that button there again. Yeah, so for me, this would not answer where my Bowes ancestors come from. So the curiosity is still there. So, and actually, my great-grandfather dies 12th of August 1915, but he had one son and he was a young child, but there was no family history. So all the family history just disappeared on that day. So pretty tragic. We had no family history of where we came from. So the only option for me was DNA. So if you click the next one. So, right, so today I work with commercial ancestral DNA tests. Now there's basically three different tests. There's the mtDNA, which is your maternal line, so your mother's mother, all the way back through to Eve, basically. So you can do that test. You can do a Y-DNA test that does the paternal line, so your father's father. It looks at the Y chromosome, which is only passed from father to son. And then there's the autosomal test. So this is like a bit of a shotgun approach, which looks at bits of all your DNA. And it looks at shared ancestry only really within the last 200 years, because beyond that 200-year time frame, the amount of DNA you inherit is too small to register in a test. So it's a 200-year window, but all your ancestral lines. Now, in some instances, if DNA isn't an option, well, that's not a problem, because I can, depending on the surname, you can reveal quite a lot. So I'll just run you through the mtDNA test first and what it can reveal.
Just click on that.
Yeah. Oh, so before I go into the DNA, there's three crucial things to remember. So the more DNA that two people share, the more recent your ancestor is. Okay. Secondly, your surname still concentrate in the area they first appeared, or in the area where your ancestor first settled. So our ancestors were far less mobile. Now, I don't know if any of you ever heard of peg sayers. Yeah. It's like,
First of Irish school.
oh my lord, I can't stand peg.
I'm getting like her again.
You had to study Peg and Peg's life story when you're doing Irish. Now, I was terrible at Irish. I have to point that out. I was absolutely terrible at Irish. And at 15, so I was studying Peg about 15. You had to read, this was in Gaelic, this was in Irish, and you'd read it out and you get the translation. The only thing I can remember about Peg is that she lived within 5 miles of the ocean, down in County Kerry, on one of the peninsulas, but she'd never seen the ocean until she was 20. She had never, and that was on the day she was marrying her husband, who she'd never met in her life. So as growing up in the 80s in Dublin, you just can't relate to Peg, So Peg was, importantly for Peg tells me that our ancestors could have lived and died in an area, never having ventured more than 5 miles. Probably 5 miles because it's the most you can get, and be able to get back before it gets dark. So that's pretty remarkable, but it's also crucial for the DNA. So if you go next one. So as I say, by this stage, after reading Peg, I'm terrible at Irish. In my young teenage mind, I was convinced my ancestors were either Old English or Normans, and they'd never spoke Irish, because I was couldn't comprehend how bad, I was really bad at Irish. I managed to scrape through, but I was particularly bad. So if you go next. So pinpointing maternal Eve. So where did your, pinpointing maternal is a bit tricky to date, but you can pinpoint an origin. So this is what your DNA test results look like for an empty DNA test. All you get is your genetic distance. So 0 means it's your closest match. 1 means a one-step mutation. It's a more distant match. You get a little bit on the names. So I've removed the sort of personal names, but you can see here, these names aren't random. These are Western European names. And my son is half Chinese, so his mother's Chinese. So his last names and his matches would look very different from this. So they're not random. What you also get with this, with these results, is the location or the name of an earliest ancestor, maternal ancestor. Okay, so this is your mother's mother's mother. So these are all their earliest, and they're not random either. So there is a little pattern emergence, particularly here. Now you also get the mtDNA haplogroup, that's up there. And that's just a specific mutation. And then the match date. So if you click on again. So as I say, all I've done here is I've concentrated on the surnames of those earliest maternal ancestors. And you can see I've highlighted them. Green is Irish, blue is Scottish, and the sort of purple is Scandinavian. So there is a pattern here. There's a definite pattern here. Now the ones I haven't highlighted, like Williamson and Mitchell, they can be either Scottish, Irish, or even English. So if you again. Now, as I say, so T2 haplotype, this is the mtDNA for this test subject. This is Mr. Reed. T2, okay, so it's found in Ireland, 5% of the female population, or actually population as a whole. It's found in Scotland. So this doesn't tell me anything. Okay, you click again. Yep. Double click. Yeah. So these are the specific. So this is our maternal Eve, and she lived 72,000 years ago. I think she's actually being pushed back over. It was a single male who gave, or female, who gave rise to every female here today. Every female on the planet, there was an Eve, and she lives. I'd say it's probably more like 120,000. These figures keep getting pushed back. But this is the branch for this test subject. When you come down here, well, you're still talking about 21,000 years here. And this so this is the one he gets on his test, and that's 7,000. This still isn't telling me anything. 7,000 years old. That's not telling me much. So if you click. So if we go back here, I'm looking here now, where's the pattern here? So these three stand out. And where are these three locations? So if you click again. Here we go. If you can see straight away, they're all along the coast in Scandinavia. And so his maternal ancestor has gone from Scandinavia into Scotland and then into Ireland, where you see those surname matches to the Scots and Irish. And the time frame has to be around the Viking Age. Okay. So if you click the next. So now, I noticed a Scandinavian link to the sort of coastline around Denmark, Sweden, and Norway. What about these Scottish surnames? Because there's quite a lot of Scottish surnames in there. So there's MacNeil, Cochrane, Lockhart. There's also Williamson, Mitchell, maybe more. So is there a pattern to those surnames? Where do those surnames occur? And is there a common area of association? So if you click, and there is, it's this area here. So his maternal Eve has come from the Viking Age into this area here, into southwest Scotland. And actually, his earliest ancestor is a Fullerton. The Fullertons are actually found on this Isle of Arran. I think this is Arran. Yeah. That's right. So if you click the next one. So what about the Irish surnames? So McCaughey, Markey, and McElroy. Where are they found? So is there a connection to those names? So if you click the next. Yeah. And it's here. It's in the northeast. So as I said, his earliest ancestor is a Fullerton, and she was Scots-Irish. And this, as you know yourselves, is an area of plantation Scots-Irish settlement. So if you click again. As I say, Mr. Reid, his earliest ancestor, his mother's mother is a Scots-Irish Fullerton from Antrim. So that's all he knew. So if you click again, I examine Antrim. So this is the plantation surnames in Belfast Lough. And there's your Fullerton, right in Island McGee. So his female ancestor has gone from Scandinavia to Southwest Scotland, Arran, and then she's ended up here, Fullerton's on Island McGee. And here's the Cahys and the McElroys that appeared as his match. So, and sorry for this map. So this is another version of one of those maps, but this shows the plantation surnames of Protestant farmers with each surname where they concentrate in early census data. So it took a long time to make the map, but it's well worth it in this instance. So if you click again, and I think I just summarized these results here. So his Fullertons originate near Island McGee, southeast Antrim. His maternal line has come. Now they would have probably, I've taken Kilmarnock as the epicenter, but his Fullertons are actually on the Isle of Arran. And his maternal ancestor. So I have to say, maternal DNA is trickier, but it can be done. My success rate maternal DNA is a fraction of what it would be for Y DNA, but it's still, you can get really good results with it. So if you go on, I'll go on now to the Y DNA results. So this test subject is Mr. McWilliams. And well, again, what you get with the results is you just get the name of the people you match, you get the match date, you get the how much they've tested or how many markers. Now the DNA companies like you to test, they like to keep you testing, okay? So they usually come out with lots of markers, more markers, then you spend a fortune. But I recommend test the 67 markers or 111 markers, and that should be sufficient. So what you get the haplogroup. Now these are all different because this is like a tree and you've got branches, okay? So this can confuse people. Don't worry about that for the moment, because what I'm interested in is where did your ancestor live, your paternal ancestor, when surnames appeared? Because what you see here is a snapshot of surnames that arose among related males living in a specific location. And there's a pattern. You can see here I've highlighted some names that recur, like Fee, Coyne, McCamus, McGuinness, and Fournier. Now Fourniers are an outlier because these guys, that's a non-paternal event. That's usually an adoption somewhere, and it's happened somewhere, maybe in Canada or something. So you get, but you can't see a pattern in the results. So if you click again. So what I usually do is I look at the surname, where does it first appear as a match, and how many people with that surname appear. So you can see here he's got, in his results at 111, 67, 11, for McWilliams, he's got 11 guys called McWilliams or Williams. I have to keep Williams in there because it might have been shortened over time. I should have also put Williamson in there because Mac Williams might have been anglicized Williamson.
Burks.
Or
Burks.
Burks, yeah.
Most of my Williams are Burks.
You might find a Burke down here. You might find Burke through here actually. But well, you also see it. So what you see here, I've color coded them for whether they're Irish, Scottish, or Irish or Scottish associated. These ones in purple are Irish or Scottish associated, or violet are Irish or Scottish associated. So if you go on to the next one there. So just to look at the McWilliams surname, so he matches with a McWilliams. That means that he's descended from a McWilliams Adam, the first guy to take that surname. And he lived anywhere about from 800 AD onwards. So, firstly, looking at the McWilliams surname, it's very much associated with the northeast and the north. I've included the Williams. Now you can see there's some Williams up here, so it might have been shortened at some point. So if you click on the next one. So he also carries this M22 marker, so you might know it as the Noel marker. I don't like to call it the Noel marker, and I'll explain why later. But M222, this is the area where I find all my case studies with that marker. And there's only two groups of McWilliams in there. There is a Williams down here, but no, I'm going to disregard those two. So these two are very interesting because based on his DNA, he's related to one of these two groups. And his surname matches should literally localize to one of those two groups.
Those Balance Screen McWilliams are Burks.
Are they?
Came in the 16th century.
These ones or these ones?
No, the northern one.
Northern ones.
I
But
don't
there,
know
but
about
there
that.
might be two different groups in there. I'll show you actually later on. So if you click on the next. So what stood out for me for this test subject is the sheer number of guys called McLaughlin and all the different spellings of McLaughlin here. 41 different guys named McLaughlin in his DNA matches. And he's got 16 Donnellys. Now you'll know Donnellys from this area here. So these two stood out. So there's lots of Irish surnames, but these two stand out in pure frequency because there's a definite link between Williams, McLaughlin, and Donnelly. And what I'm looking for is a common area of association for those three surnames. So if you click next, and it's here, right here. You can see I don't find McLaughlin's down here, but they're all here. So his ancestor is in this location. And if you click on again, and here we go. So McWilliams, and they're literally surrounded by genetic relatives. So what you see here is a snapshot of surnames that are rising among these related males. His McWilliams is here, and all the ones in red are recurring surnames. So Donnelly, your 16 Donnellys and your McLaughlins. And the ones in yellow are singular matches. There's your Burke. There's a Burke there. Singular match, yeah. So if you click on next one. Now, what you also find, well, what I found in my research is that it's a sort of hierarchical thing for clans. So you have the top dog at the top. And in this instance, he matches the McLaughlins and some Dohertys, but mainly the McLaughlins. So his rich relatives basically were the McLaughlins. He's down here, but he matches, all these guys appear among his matches, but it's the McLaughlins that stand out. And there's the Burkes again, yeah. So, okay, so if you click the next.
Until the 19th century in that area, McWilliams, McBurks were used interchangeably.
Yeah.
Now Berkeley, they were called, Irish.
They might have gone Gaelicized Burkes then.
Yeah, they came from Mayo, McWilliam Burke.
But for this guy here now, remember I mentioned Williamson. There's Williamsons up here, and I don't know whether these guys have just gone Protestant and gone anglicized the name. It's a bit unusual that there's Williamsons there, and McWilliams are here. And down here is the townland. I don't think there's an I in it. I think it's McWilliam.
No, that's not from William.
I know this. I always look for a town. So this is, is it? I don't know.
Stop.
It'll depend on a Gaelic translation. But I always look in an area and find something. Now, I never say it's definitive because you can't with Irish place names. But this did catch my eye. Okay, so this is the area just between Magara, am I pronouncing that right? Mahara. And Moneymore, that's where his paternal ancestral genetic homeland is. That's where his ancestor lived when he first took the McWilliams surname.
You kept down to Townland.
In
the 17th century, all the McWilliams did Townland.
What's that?
They're all from one Townland, so they.
Well, for his DNA, now there's a bit of movement of people and populations in here, and that can make it difficult sometimes. But this is his core area because that's where all his DNA reaches back to. So if you click on the next one. So, all right. So the great thing with Y-DNA results is that I can look even further back. So I was looking at his closest matches in that, and they were all Irish or Scottish or Scots-Irish, mix of surnames, but mainly. But I can look further back, and see what the ethnicity is. So if you click on that again. So yeah, so your more distant matches reflect shared ancestry before the surname appeared. So that can reveal your ethnicity. So if you click again, and again. So for example, if you have close Irish matches, but then more distant Scottish matches, it means your ancestors come from Scotland into Ireland. And if you have close Irish surname matches, but then they switch to Scandinavian surnames, like you've seen in the mtDNA results, that means your ancestor was Viking or maybe Galablast. So if you click again. Now, most males here today will have a sort of, will have this pattern. So they'll have lots of matches in Britain and Ireland. But when you look deeper, it comes into the Rhine River Valley. You literally get a clustering of your more distant matches within the Rhine River Valley. And that is, if you click again, this is a classic, I'm going to call it, no, back a second.
Too far.
This is a classic Celtic paternal DNA distribution or distribution of locations. Basically, these are all locations recorded by your genetic relatives, their earliest ancestors. Okay, so this guy in this instance, they concentrate in Southwest Ireland. Some shared ancestry here in Scotland, and England, Wales, but then even deeper, it's Central Europe. This is Celtic. Most people here today will have this distribution pattern. If you go back today and look at your widening out results, you'll see this majority. So if you click again. Now, if you compare that, this is someone who has Viking ancestry. So they have their closest matches indicate an origin, in this case, in Scotland. But when I look at the locations recorded by more distant genetic relatives, they're in Scandinavia. So this is classic Viking. And they've, in this instance, ended up with Scotland. So if you go, yeah. So this is how I work out your ethnicity. And in my experience, everybody wants Viking DNA. This is like if you're American, you want to have a bit of Native American DNA. When you're Ireland, you usually want to have a bit of Viking DNA. So, but that's rare. I'll show you in a little while. So linking so autosomal. So most of you today will probably have taken an autosomal DNA test. That's like Ancestry 23andMe Family Finder from FTDNA. So if you click on, and this is what your results will look like. Again, you get the name of the people you match. You get the amount of DNA you share. So the higher that figure, the closer your ancestry or your shared ancestor. What you don't see here is that you also, what is also in the sort of background is that these guys all have ancestral trees and locations of their ancestors. And you can actually mine that data. So if you click, so what I do is I go in and I go, okay, this guy in this instance has almost 18,000 genetic relatives, people he shares an ancestor with within the last 200 years, anywhere along his ancestral tree. What I can do is I can go, okay, let's look at those who share 20 centimorgans of DNA, so relatively close DNA matches. I'm getting rid of background noise. And I can then search for, let's see how many of these people record Ireland in their ancestral tree, the background information you don't see. And when I do that, so I get 19% are recording Ireland, 7.9% are recording Northern Ireland, 13% Scotland. So this is a good signal. You know, it means there's definitely an Irish connection in there, a couple of lines, or ancestral lines. So if you click again. So I can take that further and I can go, okay, I can search for each Irish county and see how many genetic relatives record a county. And when I do that, I start to get these DNA hotspots. So he's got 6 here. Now, when I see Ulster like this usually means there's some Scots-Irish in there as well. So these locations here are hotspots for Scots-Irish DNA signals. So if you go on again. And I do the same in Scotland, and you can see in this instance, I'm getting 4 DNAs, Stirlingshire, Fife, Midlothian, and Lanarkshire. So at this point, I go, okay, he's got good DNA signals, he's got good DNA hotspots emerging. Let's have a look at his ancestral surnames. And it's Rudden, Harper, Rooney, Craig, McCaffrey. And I've highlighted them based on what I think is the origin, okay? So if you click again. Now, what I can do is I can see where each of those surnames appears on each map. So on medieval Ireland, plantation Ireland, and in Scotland. And what you can see is, yeah, you know, some surnames are common and found in different locations. There's definitely clustering, particularly here in Monaghan Cavan, for the McCaffreys, the Rooneys, the Ruddens. And again, with the plantation, Sloan, Harpers, Wiggins, Johnston. But again, what you have in when you have Scots-Irish or Anglo-Irish DNA from the plantation times, Antrim is often a hotspot because that's where they first land. And then they're moving as more land becomes available, but they're also moving, the same surnames are moving together. So, so if you click the next one, now what I can do then is I can again look at the counties, but again, in this instance, look for each surname and see if a surname is appearing among your genetic relatives in a particular county. And you can see it's quite striking. For Rudden, it's Monaghan. For Harper, again, Monaghan. And for McCaffrey, no, McCaffrey's difficult. It's got Sligo and Monaghan. Something's happened there, maybe a migration. But for Rooney, you can see Sligo's coming up.
Surprised really County Down doesn't come on this. The origin of the name.
Which?
County Down, but the County Down Land Rover.
Well, County Down and Antrim are sort of, it's difficult to distinguish. Antrim always gives a good signal, but it's, is it because there's a bit of migration to Belfast at some date and it's actually down? Yeah. So this is how I link each of your. I usually say I can go to great grandparents. So your 16 closest ancestral surnames, I can link in this manner with specific locations. So if you go next slide. So just click there again. So I've done the same thing for Scotland, and actually you can see this. Even though Johnson is a very common surname, in my analysis it's coming up with Stirlingshire, and here's Stirlingshire here, and there's Johnson's there. And even for Craig's a very common surname as well, but you're getting it. It's coming up between Midlothian, is it West Lothian, and Lanarkshire. Here's the Craigs here.
Well, can I ask you something? Sorry, this might be obvious for everybody else. Where are you getting the counties from? Whatever you're concerned, are there people who are located there?
No,
or the people you're finding on trees there?
No, I'm looking. So if you go back, no, it's alright. It's too far to go back. But
Sorry,
if you go to so in this instance, it's working from Ancestry. So all I'm doing is I'm putting in a surname I want to search for.
Yeah.
So I'll put in Johnson. And then I'll put in, okay, we'll search for Johnston in association with Shetland among all that information stored by your genetic relatives.
No consensus or anything.
No, this is purely from your DNA results.
Would this be limited to people who've done DNA?
Yes, they have the
For
DNA
example,
test,
for example, there's a
but they've all entered in their ancestral information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But ancestrally, Johnson, for example,
Yeah.
is strictly located to the borders.
That's the
Beside
biggest.
there.
That's the biggest Johnsons. But these are all Johnsons here as well.
Yeah.
These are the most notable, most famous, and probably the most prominent in the plantations. But these guys, this is the Johnsons he's related to, because all his genetic relatives are recording their Johnsons in their DNA
See,
tree.
for instance, Fermanagh, the third or fourth most common name is Johnsons.
Yeah.
They're quite relatable to the border clan were brought in along with the Armstrong.
I don't know where his Johnsons end up, but his Johnsons from his DNA is saying they're from Stirling.
Sorry, because I'm stupid. I don't know if I'm thinking the same as everybody else. So whatever you're talking about, it's in their DNA or it's in their tree. Are they on people's trees or are they in?
So
I've done my
this is
DNA,
the information
Yeah.
recorded by your genetic relatives. I'm just mining it. So I'm just searching among all your genetic relatives, 20,000 of them.
Right.
I'm looking to see how many
My matches, right? Okay.
or
so,
where they record their Johnsons.
so this is somebody that's actually documented whenever they put
Yes,
onto
they
these
all put their
sites.
tree on
Not
Ancestry.
necessarily everybody has. All right. So
Most of them have, and that's
Okay,
why it's
I'm
best to
with you.
test with Ancestry. More people test with them,
yeah.
and almost always they always put on their
Okay.
ancestral
That's lovely.
information.
Thank you.
If you try this with 23andMe, the results are terrible.
Yeah. All
But
right.
with Ancestry.com, it's pretty amazing. As I say, it's pretty.
Okay,
So if
thank
you
you.
go click the next one there.
Yep.
See that? All right, so I'm just showing where all these surnames are, so you can just literally see this is the hotspot and this is all the surnames. Not really. As I say, if you go on to the next one. And again, his Johnsons are there up near Stirling, and he's got his Craigs down near Hamilton. So if you go on to the next one, I just summarize it all. And this is it. So he's given me, in this instance, he only has what, 10 surnames, but in each one, just using his DNA, I've got origins for almost all of them. Okay, so if you go on again. So no DNA, no problem. So as I say, surnames still concentrate in the area they first appeared or where your ancestor first settled. So if you click on again, and I'll say that they were far less mobile. Now I made these maps because I need to do case studies, and the material, the data just wasn't, there was nothing like this. I had to make them in order to do the case studies. But there's some interesting findings. If you click again. So I've put them all free to browse online. There's no cookies, there's no nothing, there's no advertisements. You just got to go on, select the map. So go up the maps, just select the map, and then just literally click it on, or if you click on there,
Yep.
I'll just demonstrate it here. So if you click again, and you just hover your cursor over the area of interest. Now, Scottish surnames are absolutely amazing. I love Scottish surnames. I could spend all day just browsing. I met a guy when I was in Glasgow last, and he says, I asked him what his surname, he was an American guy, I asked him what his surname was, he said Snodgrass. And I knew what Snodgrass, I knew it was a Scottish surname, but he had to convince me it was Scottish, because Snodgrass, there it is there, Glasgow. And he was actually in Glasgow. I couldn't remember where it was. It was literally, he did not go far. He was looking for his ancestors. But the important thing is here, if you click, Witherspoons, I didn't know Witherspoons, that's a Scottish surname, at the pub chain. You click again. So surnames in red on this map are exclusive to a single location in Scotland, not found anywhere else. So farmers with that surname only occur in that location. Okay? And I'd say about 15, maybe 20% of Scottish surnames are unique. They're only associated.
Is that because predominantly they are from place names as opposed to?
I don't know.
patronymic?
This is very unusual, this area, and I've picked it out for a reason, because there's a lot in this area. This is this is Dumbarton, the fort of the Britons. There's no Gaelic surnames here. There's no Max. So yeah, I think a lot of them are Pollock, Paisley. Yeah.
They're all from place names. There is a different.
Not all.
Well, a lot of
A lot of them, yes, a disproportionate number of them. Pollock. Here's another one. So these are fascinating. I say I love Scottish surnames. If you go again, there's one more image from this. Now, the other thing about Scottish surnames is that they often tell you who your or the ethnicity of your ancestor. English is English. Scott, well, I'll come to that, but we'll come to that in a little while. But Fleming, here's Ireland. Look at Ireland. And then you've, of course, Wallace is Welshman, literally Welshman. Look at this one here, Rome or Roman. That's I couldn't believe that one, and I talk about that one in a little while. So if you click again, so Scots, Irish, or Anglo-Irish ancestors. Now, in many instances, all I require, if you have Scots, Irish, or Anglo-Irish, is I just need a surname and where do you record your earliest ancestor in Ireland in order to link them back to Scotland. So if you click again, and that's because when the plantations occurred, they've come in family groups, and the surnames are literally mirroring each other. So in this instance, you have Ireland here. It's down here near Dumfries in black arrow, but it's surrounded by the Shannons, McCartneys, McBurneys, and McKnights, and there they are. There, Shannon is the Galloway spelling, but it's literally mirroring each other. So it's very simple sometimes. If you haven't done a DNA, just give me your surname. I can usually track them back. So we go again. Yeah, so there you go. So now I'll get into the research. So this is the interesting part. So Irish and Scottish maternal DNA, what is it revealed? So if you click, the female population of both countries are far more stable. And if you click there again, and that's probably because when all these conquerors arrive, or like in America, they tend not to bring the wives and the girlfriends, and they marry the local girls. So that's like, if you think the Normans and the Vikings especially. Now it's different when the plantations occur because it's whole families and whole communities basically. So if you click again. As I mentioned, pinpointing maternal leave can be very difficult, a bit challenging, can get expensive because there's a lot less DNA to work with, and you got to sequence probably the whole lot, and that can be expensive. So this is pretty much specialty stuff, but if you really, I will look at I'll look at the results regardless, but it can be challenging. So if you go, so now I get on to the paternal case study. So male DNA. And what I've done here, remember I showed you those maps. So if you just click again and so if we go to this map, so these are your Brittonic Celts. So these are all the case studies I've done that have this signature going back to Central Europe, a Brittonic Celtic signature. If you go back again. Yeah, so if you click it. No, back.
Oh, sorry.
Just once again. All right, so here, so I've literally just color-coded each pin depending on the ethnicity for that test subject. And I just wanted to see what that revealed. So you can see here, Neolithic is in yellow, so they're easy to spot. And the Norman and the Viking. Now the Norman ones are tricky. Remember, when the Normans get to Ireland and Scotland, they usually have a surname with them. So trying to pin them down in Ireland can be challenging because you're hoping that they have had, indiscretions with the local girls, and you get the surnames that, reflect that area appearing in your DNA. So it's a bit challenging. So I've probably got they're probably less representative here.
So are you doing this as surnames, Tyrone?
No, this is each pen is just a case study I've done.
Right.
I've pinpointed an origin, but I've just color coded it based on the ethnicity that's been revealed.
Right from the DNA.
From the DNA,
Not from this,
yes.
right,
Okay,
right.
so if you go, so this is all from the DNA. So if you go, click again, and again, and once more. And this is the map I get. Now, what's really interesting is there's a clear, this is so this is pre-Viking. Actually if you imagine this, if you think for a minute as, so there's two colors here that dominate, the dark green and the light sort of green. That's pre-Viking, but there's a clear north-south divide. So there's Northern Gaels, Southern Brittonic Celts. Okay, so I'll explain that in a little while. So if you, so this is just a dominant, now this is on the website. Actually, I've broken it down on stats here. So there are a couple of striking differences. Ireland has more Neolithic paternal DNA. About 4% of males will have a Neolithic marker. That compares to Scotland, where it's only 1%. Now that makes sense because Ireland's more remote. So these guys are going to survive because you've got less waves of migration. So, and then when I say Neolithic, that's your guys who built Stonehenge, or not Stonehenge, Stonehenge and Newgrange. So those people.
Have you isolated the Mesolithic gene?
No, so I don't do ancient DNA. So that's all academic.
DNA.
That's the stuff they'll pick up in Rathlin Island and stuff like that, and Newgrange. Yeah, so that's your Neolithic. So it's the Celts that dominate. I'm using Celt quite broadly here. So Celts, anything that comes in from around 800 BC through to maybe the 1st century AD. And there's 3 different groups. There's a Brittonic, there's a Scots-Irish, and Irish Gael in Ireland. But it's 86, 79, not much difference. If you go south into England, that's probably about maybe 60%, yeah, because you've got more movement coming into England. Now, the striking difference is there's not that much Viking DNA in Ireland, only about 2%. In Scotland, it's a whopping 11% almost. I was shocked at that. Now, the Norman, as I say, Normans are tricky, so these are probably underrepresented, but the percentage is low. So if you click again. So this is your Neolithic marker, your IP37. Now, I think the 2 in Ulster might be sort of more recent arrivals. So one was a Henry, so they might come in plantation times. But in general, you see in Ireland, they're along the west. They've been pushed west. And that makes sense. Every new arrival tends to push the earlier arrivals west. And this is the marker as it would be today. So this is today, which is, is it representative of 2,000 years ago? I don't know. But Sardinia is, I'm off here for a wedding soon. This is the heartland of if you want to go look for Neolithic DNA, or it's Sardinia apparently. So that's going to be interesting. So if you go on to the next. So as I mentioned, this is your Brittonic. These are Brittonic Celtic DNA case studies. Most males here today will be of Brittonic Celtic origin. That's the first wave of those Celts coming in from using the Rhine River from Central Europe. Okay, so yeah, so if you click on the next image, I think I showed the Celtic world. Yeah, next. Here it is. So this is the Celtic world. This is 400 BC. Now they've come all the way into Turkey and most of Central Europe and Britain. So this looks good. This is interesting. So if you go on again. Now, so it's the Romans that record all this. We're going on Roman sources. So how accurate are these Roman sources? So if you click, so there is some shared ancestry exhibited here. So you have the Brigantes in Southern Ireland, you got the Brigantes up here. You've got, if you click the thing there. So yeah, I'll say these tribal markers recorded by the Romans. Now, DNA testing confirms that there is indeed shared ancestry. If you click again, there's 3 groups here. There's the Dumnane, Damnoni, and Dumnoni. And I'm going to demonstrate how I know that these guys are all linked. So if you click again. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And if you see here, this is my results. This is my Y-DNA test results. And if you look at my matches, so Bow, I wasn't sure of what its origin was. I have Bow and Bowes coming up as matches, but I have other surnames like Carroll, and I have Flanagan. So again, it's not random. There is a pattern. So if you click again, and these are all. So these are the surnames that stand out. These are my recurring surname matches. I match other Bowes, I match Carrolls, Flanagans, and Dooleys. So these are 3 Gaelic Irish ones. I've got a scattering of what you call it, Norman surnames. That tells me my ancestors live near the Normans because they're forming relationships, and some of my genetic relatives are taking Norman surnames: Purcell, Morris, Dillon. So if you click again, and when I look at where all those surnames occur, those closest ones, it's all in County Laois. It's in this area here, and that's the Damnane. So that's that area there. So if you click again. Now, so if I just go into that area, these are all my recurring surnames. This is where my ancestors originate, and where in Laois it's Bow, B-O-W-E. The S gets added in Dublin by some administrator. I don't know why, but he adds an S. And you can see I'm literally surrounded. If you click, so actually no, if you see the Dooleys there, if you click again, we'll come back to the Dooleys. So. All right, so my ancestors, again, these are my wealthy genetic relatives, the O'Carrolls. They own a lot of territory in Offaly. And you can see my ancestors did indeed border the Normans, because you have the Purcells here. I have Normans in Fitznorman. They were originally Fitznorman. I have Mitchells. And so these surnames are all appearing among my genetic relatives. So if you go again. Now this is where my ancestors lived. Now, when I discovered this in 2010, I went and I looked on the map and I was looking for a place name for my Bowes ancestors, and I found Bowes Crossroads. I nearly fell off the chair. I couldn't believe it. That was like the icing on the cake. And so, of course, DNA testing has since confirmed that my DNA leads back to here. And my ancestors were Gaelic Irish, they weren't Norman. Or they were Irish, they weren't Norman. So that I'm just terrible at languages. So poor old Peg, yeah. So if you look here, if I've got a guy here, if you click again.
Yeah.
Now there's my genetic my doppelganger. Yeah, that's Joe Dooley. His results were sent to me. He's a match to me. So we were separated at birth literally about 1,200 years ago based on our genetic distance. Our Y chromosomes are practically identical. And if you ever need, he's still got that mane of hair. So if you ever need, I don't know, evidence that male pattern baldness is by the maternal line, there you go. That's it there.
He's your wife?
When my ancestor took Bowes, maybe my second cousin on my father's side comes a Dooley.
So you think your ancestor took Bowes from the place name?
No, my ancestor is probably, I find a reference to Tulloch Bui. So that's probably the earliest I can get for that surname. And it gets anglicized to Bow, and then the S gets added later.
Great.
But while my ancestor becomes Bow, his ancestor becomes Dooley. And he lived, look, there's Dooley's Crossroads right over there. And so, and Ireland is great because there's always evidence in the place names. You'll always find something. So if you go on, if you go on next one. But what about my deeper ancestry? So if you look here, so all my close matches are going to Laois. But then when I look at my distant matches and I look at the surnames and what surnames appear and how frequently, I've got Hendersons, I've got Nesbitts, I've got Farris, I've got 27 guys called Henderson, 22 called Nesbitt. So my ancestor, before he gets to Laois, He was in Scotland. And is there a common area of association for, let's look at these, Henderson, Nesbitt, and Farris, and if you click, there it is there. And it's right up where that group there is, the Damnoni. So my ancestors, before they get to Ireland, were in this area here. For some reason, I don't know when precisely, they cross into Ireland, end up in Laois. But this is quite nice because I quite like Scotland, so this is my claim to Scottish ancestry. But if you've noticed, if you go again, if you click again, I didn't mention the Stuarts. Now the Stuarts are interesting because lots of Stuarts have DNA tested. And the Stuarts, if you look at the history, they're Bretons. So they're from Brittany. And they accompany, or as Fitzallen accompanies William the Conqueror, 1066. He ends up in Renfrew near Paisley, and he becomes Stuart, first Stuart. And they've all Y DNA tested, and the Stuarts all link back to Cornwall, which is where all the Bretons originated. They literally, when the Anglo-Saxons come in, there's a big exodus basically into Brittany from Cornwall. So these guys link me back in to Cornwall. And there you see they're all, so they're like Cumbric, so they're the Welsh-speaking, now Wales is literally like your English Gaelic. Wales is the original language of the English. It's just that the Anglo-Saxon English becomes a dominant language, but Welsh is the original language. And these guys all go into Brittany. So my DNA links all these three groups here. So this map is accurate. This is remarkable. I was a bit skeptical looking at this going, oh, they probably just copied and copied.
Ptolemy's map, you know, is very, very controversial.
Exactly. Well, you'll get even more. I'll show you why. If you click on the next one. All right, so that Stuarts just linked that third group. Now, Rome and Julius Caesar. Okay, so there's quite a bit of Roman DNA in Scotland. I know it's Roman because it's very unusual markers like G, haplotype G, which is like Mediterranean. They're all Mediterranean or Middle Eastern markers. They're sitting there in Scotland. They're all sitting near Antonine Wall and just above Hadrian's Wall. So if you click again. So Caesar's, everything comes back to Julius Caesar. He changes, I cannot emphasize how much he changes Europe's fate, basically. So he ensures that Europe's future is Roman rather than Gaulish. Now, we'll get rid of Celt here because it's Gauls. The Romans always call them Gauls. It's the Greeks that call them Celts. Romans call them Gauls. So in 58 BC, the Gauls are under pressure. They're migrating from the Rhine area into what is Roman territory. So click again. Now, the Gauls, it's precarious because they're stuck between Rome and their sort of distant cousins, their sort of crazy distant cousins, the Germanic tribes. So that's not so if you click again, so they can't go west. Now, the defeat of the Gauls has often been described as a genocide. It probably was because I think Caesar himself says he kills 1 million and enslaves 1 million. And so you have to imagine yourself as a Gaul. What do you do? So they can't go west or south because that's Roman lands. They can't go east because they're escaping the Germans. They seek refuge in Britain. This is what the DNA is showing me. So if you click on the next one. So 58 BC, the conquest of Gaul begins. And what the DNA, if remember I showed you looking at this and matches, they always come back to this is the heartland of the Celts or the Gauls. I like to call them the Gauls. This is the Gallic heartland. Now you can't go west, you can't go east, you can't go south. The only escape route is into Britain. And I know they turn up in Britain because if you looked at that map, they had the Belgae were in Britain. Belgae are also from Belgium. We give name to Belgium. So they do turn up in Britain. So we click. And this is what happens. So Caesar invades 54 BC, 55 BC, but I don't think that's enough to push them north. But Claudius in 43 BC, he wants to make a name for himself, and he arrives. And if you're a Gaulish refugee and you remember what the Romans did when they hit Gaul, what do? You stay one step ahead of this Roman advance. And this is what the DNA is showing what happened. So if you click again. So there are three, so there so they've gone from Gaul, but they're called Gauls down here, but when they get up here, we call them Gaels. And there's 3 distinct markers. When I look at DNA case studies, there's 3 different markers. They're not related. These markers are not related. That means there's a mixed bunch here with at least 3 markers making their way as refugees up through Britain and coming into Scotland and Ireland. So if you click again. So the Gaels are Gauls. So this is the case studies. This is the Irish RM222, which you might remember know as the O'Neill marker. I don't like to use that. There's a Scottish M269. Now I just use M269. I haven't looked deeper into it. I should really try and find a marker, a more specific marker, but I'm just going to call them M269. And then there's your Scots-Irish IM223. Now these Gauls, they all share a language. We know that because they speak Gaelic. Similar surnames, which has evolved from Mag, which is the son in Gaulish, becomes Mac and MAC or MC. And you got the, so there's shared ancestry here, but the markers are quite different. So it's the language, it's a cultural thing that's uniting them, but there's 3 different markers. So if you go again. And just so I just want to illustrate here. So this is my Roman case studies. They're my Gaulish case studies. If you click again. This is your limit of, so this is Gaelic Scotland, non-Gaelic Scotland. So this is non-Gaelic surnames. So I always thought this was Gaelic Scotland. This area here is Gaelic Scotland as well. It's just that Gaelic's extinct.
Yeah, most of that's a result of Irish colonization, isn't it?
Some of it, I'll show you. I'll show you. So if you imagine this area here, this is where I find Roman. I never find Roman DNA here. In this areas, these areas here. I find them in this area here. So likewise, I don't find Gaelic in this Gaelic markers or locations this area. So these guys have kept ahead of the Romans. So if you click again. So it's always those Gaelic DNA signatures are always beyond Roman settlement. I know this is quite controversial, but I'll explain. I find no Irish origin for the Scots Gaels. And I explained that before somebody throws something at me. So if you click again. Now the Gaels evolved from a mixed group of refugee Gauls seeking refuge from Rome at some point between, I think it's actually more like 100 AD. I think it's when Claudius gets
Are
here.
you talking about the Picts here or the Gaels?
Picts are already up there.
You put them both together.
No, Picts are your Brittonic Celts. They're the earlier guys. The
Where
Gaels,
were they in your map?
they were up in Aberdeenshire.
You haven't got them at Eastern.
I can't
that's
distinguish them between the Brittonic Celts and the Pictic. I think it's more of a cultural thing. DNA wise, they're similar, but they're Celts, but I can't distinguish. It's more of
It's a big language difference.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. So if you click again. So now so let's look at this typical Scottish Gaelic DNA results. Okay, if you click here, click again. So when I get the typical results like this, a Scots Gaelic, it's dominated by Scottish surnames. It's actually really, really striking. If you click here, if you click again, this is my brother-in-law, Ross Valentine. Now Valentine doesn't strike me as Scottish. It is actually Scottish, but it's quite a late surname. It only appeared in 1600. But if you look at his results, these are his genetic relatives and all their surnames. I've highlighted the ones in green that are Irish. There are none. It's all Scottish. And even these ones here can be Scottish. So these are found in Scotland and they're Scottish. But this is just chock-a-block. It's all Mac, predominantly Mac, but it's Scottish. And look at McGregor, 34 males named McGregor, he matches. Actually, Ross is a close match to the clan chief of McGregor. If you know your history about the McGregors were outlawed in 1605 by James VI of Scotland. His ancestor was originally a McGregor, but the McGregors were outlawed. Some of them, about 40 of them, I think, were hung at the heart of Midlothian in one go. And these guys all had to scarper and take new surnames. Well, some of them did. His ancestor became a Valentine and went up to Montrose. And when I told him this, he was like, "What? No, we're related to the Stuarts. No, you're a McGregor." And he said, if you look at his results, clan chief of McGregor appears as a close match to him. So, But the striking thing is this is all Scottish. I don't see any Irish. I wish I could, because I'd love to claim the Scots as Irish, as you know, descendants from the Irish. They're not, because this is your classic Scots Gaelic Y-DNA results. So if you click again. So I should say Ross, when I can pinpoint as MacGregor ancestor up there, just close to Loch Lomond near the central belt area. But ultimately, they have matches that lead back. So if I look further back, I'm looking further back, trying to find that Irish connection. It's not there. All their matches lead back to the Isle of Skye. So if you click on. Now, what's special about the Isle of Skye? This is strange. I wasn't looking for the Isle of Skye, but I was looking for, is there some reason why the Isle of Skye, they're all ending up on the Isle of Skye, or originally ending up on the Isle of Skye, before, when Rome collapses, they emerge from the Isle of Skye, and this is where the whole arc is where they settle. So when Rome collapses, these guys leave Skye, settle throughout the Highlands and acquire new surnames. So if you click again. So, you know, I don't see anything striking. You'd expect it to be full of Gaelic surnames. It's in the Gaelic heartland of Scotland. But I don't see anything special.
You mean you don't see any Irish getting it?
There's no Irish. There's Kelly there, but Kelly can be Scottish as well.
What's the surnames? Assume dates from the earliest, late 12th, 13th century.
Yeah, surnames come later.
You would expect them to have Irish surnames.
No, but in the DNA, when you look further back, you'd expect to see it. So but I'm just looking for clues here. So if you click, now this is where I come to Ptolemy's map. So the Isle of Skye is a genetic heartland of the Scots. This is what the DNA tells me. There's no Irish link. If you click again.
There should be a lot of Viking DNA there.
Hebrides. Yeah, and some of these are. Some of these are as well, but they come later as well. So why is Ireland claimed as the origin of the Scots? And I was racking my head. I just couldn't. So if you click again, and again, here's Ptolemy's map. So now I found this online, and Ireland, Scotland, and this here is the Isle of Skye. I know it's the Isle of Skye because you do a quick Google, you find it's yours. Look what they have Isle of Skye as. Skip this. That sounds remarkably like Scottish, doesn't it? So their DNA is placing them all on that island off the west coast of Scotland. Ireland is also off the west coast of Scotland. So if you click again. So with the fall of Rome, Scots emerged from the island home off the west coast of Scotland to conquer much of Scotland. But it was Skye, Scotis, and not Ireland. It's just that there are two islands off the west coast, but it's Skye that all the DNA leads back to. I just don't find an Irish connection. I'd love to claim it, but it's not there. But that's just one marker of the Gaelic markers. So if you click on. All right, there is a link between the Irish and Scottish Gaels. Cullen. The warriors in the folklore were sent to the Isle of Skye to train as warriors. So there's some link there between Scotland and Ireland, or the Isle of Skye and Ireland. So if you click again. So this is Scott. So this is one of the other three. This is Scots Irish Gael marker. It's IM223. Now there's a 4-to-1 ratio of Scottish to Irish, and that tells me that it was emerged in Scotland and came to Ireland. Okay, so if you click again. So I think these guys are seeking refuge at some point, but some have stayed in Ireland, and then probably when the Romans have left, they've gone back into Scotland. But either way, it has left its imprint in Ireland. So if you click again. Now the Guinness Brewing family, this is their marker. And I know this because if you click there, this is Patrick Guinness. He is a direct descendant of Arthur Guinness. And he, if you click again, he funded the original research into Irish surnames and relatedness among males. He wanted to know if his Guinnesses were the McGuinness of County Down, and they are. His Y-DNA proves it. If you click again. So he's commercially DNA tested. If you go back and if you've got this marker, you'll find him in your results. And remarkably, there is a Guinness townland. And if you click on here, I'll show it here. So you know yourself, townland, 64,000, predating often the Normans. And many many are named after the clans. Now, here's Guinness. Unfortunately, so this is on the GeoHive map. So this is Guinness Town. You can just about make it out there. Guinness Townland. If you click again, unfortunately, it's Grunes. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with this. This is the Down Survey map. It's online. It's absolutely fantastic. You can click and see who owns what in 1641 and 1670. But it's Grunes. It's given us Guinness everywhere else. So this is problematic for townlands. You know, I don't know if they have an earlier one as Guinness Townland, but somehow it's become Guinness Townland. But the DNA all links back to that. Either way, the McGuinness were well established there because they've got a couple of castles there for a start.
Well, the
Yeah.
lordship of
Yeah, south, is it south down?
all Western.
Yeah. So his Y-DNA is that Scots-Irish marker, and his answer, his McGuinness, were indeed the McGuinness of County Down. It's just that very early on, I think they converted to Protestantism. They moved south and they married well. I met him for Patrick Guinness for a lunch, and amazing, it's just fascinating. So he kick-started all this research. I wouldn't be here today if he hadn't kick-started that research, and he funded it himself. So if you go, and actually the other guy who discovered, the guy who done the research, Dan Bradley, is from County Derry, I think.
Neighbour of ours.
Yeah. So if you click on the next one, and he done the research that Patrick funded. So this is the final marker. So what links all these four males? Then they're very different. I've got an African American, Professor Henry Louis Gates Jr. You might recognize him. He does the "Who Do You Think You Are?" I think it is on PBS in America. I've got Michael D. Higgins. I've got Norman P. McClelland, Scots-Irishman. Founder, that should say, Shamrock Foods, and the McClelland Irish Library of Phoenix, Arizona. His ancestors go back to County Down, Scots-Irish, McClelland. What links them all? If you click on the thing, it's this R22 Gaelic marker, Gaelic Irish marker. This is the Gaelic Irish one. This is the one you'd probably find called O'Neill, the O'Neill marker. I don't like to use that. I'll call it just RM222. These guys all carry that marker. If you click on, can you see what that says there? It has M222 and it has O'Neill. So that's Professor Gates has that marker. So how does he how does his ancestor acquire that marker? You click on next one. I know Michael D does because that's me and the missus with Michael D and First Lady there, Sabine Coyne. I've done his DNA. He carries the M22 marker. If you click here, I've done Norman's. I know he carries that marker, and I haven't actually met Mankin McGann. He's a TV scholar, or TV personality, writes some papers, really into the Irish language. He was on TV, and he'd done all the ancient stuff, you know, but he'd never touched on the commercial DNA test. So I sent him a kit, said take a test, see where it takes you. He has M222, but his ancestors in Monaghan, Cavan borderlands. Okay, so if you click on the next. So I've estimated that this marker appears in a single male who lived in or near the Inishowen Peninsula in around 200 AD. Probably a little bit earlier. So if you click on again, it's spread throughout the northern half of Ireland and southwest Scotland. It's found in a significant percentage of males with Scots-Irish ancestry, 20% maybe. So how on earth did that happen? So if you click again. An estimated 10 million Americans carried that marker alone. I think that's an underestimation. That's a lot of tourists, you know. So if you click again, so this is it. So this is all my case studies. I show Inishowen. I've shown two places where this marker turns up quite a lot. Galway, where I'm based, and Galloway. They sound very familiar, don't they? Galway and Galloway. What's the link? So if you click again. So Galway, let's look at Galway. So you click again. Michael D. Higgins, here's Higgins here. Higgins means Viking. There's a clue in the name. The others that turn up are the Halloran's. So the Halloran's are flat. Connemara's chocolate block with these M22. Everybody I know tested is M22 in Connemara. They're all M22, all the males. Halloran means pirate from across the sea, or stranger from across the sea. So they're Vikings, and they've come across the sea. They've come the sea route, but they're calling them Vikings. Vikings in this instance is more of a sort of a descriptive term. It's not really, we're not talking Scandinavian Vikings here. These guys are. So what I reckon has happened is that the Vikings have recruited the locals. The locals had the knowledge, and then they've gone raiding. The Gaels from Inishowen are providing the muscle, the Vikings the technology. So if you click again, so look at Galloway. Let's look at Galloway. So this is McClelland. This is Norman McClelland's. His ancestors are McClellands from this area here. Now some of these surnames, these are associated with Inishowen. McGee, there's McGee. Actually, there's one sort in Ireland. It's telling you where they're actually come from. These guys have come from Ireland because the Scots around their neighbours are saying, yeah, Ireland, that guy's Ireland over there. Sorry, ignore Alexander there. I think I meant McCormick there, but you've got McGill, Kelly. These are surnames. You click the next one. These are surnames that you find on Inishowen. And Inishowen is like the hotspot for M222. The Dohertys, and as I've shown you, the McLaughlins dominate M22 Y-DNA results. So if you get your results and you see Dohertys, McLaughlins, and you get your ancestor, your paternal line is going back to here. So if you click, so Galloway, so this area is Galloway. It literally translates as land of the foreign Gael. And it's a term used by the surrounding Scots to destroy, to the surrounding locals to describe these foreigners who've arrived from Ireland. Foreign Gaels come and settle here. Galloway, land of the foreign Gael. And it's the same for Galway. I tried telling people in Galway this, and they go, no, it means rocky river. It doesn't mean rocky river. It means land of the foreign Gaels. It's full of Inishowen Gaels. So the spread of Gaels into southwest Scotland. All right, sorry. So the spread of Irish Gaels through Ireland occurred before. So the land route, as I mentioned, before the Vikings arrived. But when the Vikings arrived, they bring the technology and they spread by sea. And they spread by sea into Galway, or along the west coast of Ireland, also into the Moy River Valley, and into Galloway. And the spread into here, it happens after surnames have appeared because they're all took their surnames with them. Okay, so I can date this. So if you click on the next one there. Now, who's responsible? How did they get to Galloway? Have you ever heard of Magnus Fairlegs? Yeah. I know. Now, I never knew of Magnus Fairlegs. I had no idea who this guy was, but I was. He was, exactly. He comes in. He's here from around 1198, 1199. He's raiding, but he's also using help from. He's recruiting the Gaels from Inishowen. They've got well-established links. One of his sons is Gilachrist. He becomes.
All his sons are married. One of the McLaughlin.
Yeah, and he becomes king of Norway. So, but Magnus is linked with Galloway. We know he's there, but and this is, I always thought the Viking Age ended in 1066. This guy's patrolling around the Irish Sea in 1102.
Yeah, but don't call it Viking that or
No, he's recruiting all these guys. He's recruiting muscle on his way down through the islands, but he's taking a lot of them from Galloway or from Inishowen and bringing them over.
That's the McLaughlin connection.
All those guys, well, the M22 who end up in Galloway are a result of this guy. Yeah. So, he's killed in Ulster, in County Down, where he's buried. And I think they have a festival there.
Yeah, they revived the festival. I've surveyed a supposed burial ground, which is not burial ground, just west of that body.
It'd be nice to get some bones from there.
It would.
Never turn up, yeah.
Should have been survived curiosity around there.
So, if you go on, let's just look at Galloway. So if I look at Galloway, the prominent clans in Galloway, there is a split. What's happened here? So these guys aren't all M22. The Kennedys have that IM223 marker. They're Scots-Irish. These guys here, these are your M22 Gaels from Ireland, from Inishowen. The McClellans, the Cairns, the McGees, the McCullochs, maybe the Hannahs. But the ones over there, they're your IM222 or IM223. They're Scots-Irish. These are Irish Gaels. And here's the Vikings. Grierson, Maxwell, Seward, Randolph, Gibson. So what's happened is, if you click on it again, so these guys, so the Viking Age is over. Magnus is no longer useful. These guys don't need these. So they split Galloway between them. The Gaels take Kilcobrishire and the Vikings take Dumfriesshire. Okay. Now here's the interesting part. So many of the descendants of these M222 Irish Gaels from Inishowen, they returned 500 years later, but as bilingual. These guys were still speaking Gaelic, a lot of them, and English-speaking Protestant Scots in 1600. And if you click there, and that's how he ends up with that marker. If you click again, a lot of those Scots-Irish, or Scots-Irish, would then go into the markets. Some would become plantation owners. And if you click, and that's how his ancestor ends up with an M22 marker. So there you go. So that's how I link all those 4 guys. One marker. So if you click on, so Gaul, Gal, Gaul, Gael. Okay. If you look at the map here, you click here. Gaul, Gallia. I've got Galicia up here. This is all where we know from archaeology where you find, let's say, Latene and Hallstatt artifacts. Galatia, I didn't even realize this is the Galatians from the Bible. These were Gauls who settled. I think they'd come down, they'd raided Greece, crossed into Turkey, settled in Turkey. And they're the guys mentioned in the Bible. They're all the same guys. They're all coming from the Rhine River Valley, where the Rhine and the Danube meet. That seems to be the little heartland for this group, the genetic heartland for this group. But they spread using those rivers throughout much of Europe and then into following the Rhine and up into Britain and Ireland. And that's gone on from maybe 800 BC right through to 4th century AD. So we click again. And as I said, Gaul, Donegal, base of the foreigners, or is it base of the Gaels or the Gauls? They come down to, I don't think it's Rocky River. I think it's more land of the foreign Gael, like it is in Galloway. These markers, they dominate these locations. And they're connected, but it's the Gaul. In this instance, just means Gaul. It's someone from Gaul. Okay, if you click again. Now, interestingly, when did the Irish language appear? All these Gaelic scholars, I think this isn't me putting a date to this, but they say the earliest form of Irish, or Irish that we would speak today, is from the 4th century.
Just like I say that anymore.
I think they
We'll go back to this.
Yeah.
At least 700 BC, and not.
I go on to languages.
2000 BC.
I would take this as a little bit of support and evidence for what the DNA is showing. But if you click on, I'll go on to languages again, because languages and DNA are bad bedfellows as it is.
Yeah. Anarchical.
Yeah. So we've gone through the Gaels. What about I'm going to rush through the Vikings. Not a lot. The Vikings are unusual because they assimilate. They marry the locals, and within a couple of generations, you can't tell who was the Viking and who was. They've all become Gaels in the Western Isles, or Hiberno Norse, or what about Normans? Again, actually, the best way to view where the Normans settle in Ireland is if you look at their castles. If you click on the next one, this is where the Normans settle. Every dot here is a castle that I can put a family or a Norman family to.
Those are tower houses.
Yes, castles, tower houses, yeah.
I get it, sure, but tower houses.
I know, but I have only put in the Norman ones here. These are only Normans that I know are Normans and nothing else.
I've judged it from your style, yes.
Yes.
You've been very careful.
So what is striking here, if you click there, so Ulster is literally, it's the last area or stronghold of the Gaulish world, the Gaelic world. Okay, so you click again. So, and oh yeah, there's an interest. So I'm very visual. I love maps. So as I say, I've done this. This is based on just your castles and if it's just owned by a Gaelic family or a Norman family or the Scots or Gallowglass. So you see there's some Gallowglass McSweeney's down here, I think it is. But this is the map you get. So this is like a Norman Ireland. Where did the Normans settle permanently? This is where they settled permanently. Now, this is really interesting because if you click the next one, who likes paying taxes? Nobody likes paying taxes. Could be in the DNA. Because look at this. Look, this is 14th century parish incomes as an indicator of wealth. These guys missed an opportunity here. This is just, I would call this, if you click again, this is mass tax evasion by the Irish.
Controversial now. 1306 taxation for
But
wealth.
I say this isn't my map. It just caught my eye that where they're not getting money is the where the Irish are. So it's literally mirrors each other. So somebody's not paying the taxes, and it's the Irish. So or if you don't like paying taxes, it's probably in your DNA.
They are.
Are they Gaels though? Yeah. Well, I think this is remarkably.
Gaelic taxes are a different taxation
Actually,
system. You see.
Ulster is actually, Ulster's not bad actually. But these guys here, from here, all the way through, on the west coast.
They're paying less because of a
Paying
different
less.
form of taxation.
Yeah.
Because most of their land, episcopal land, is held by their elect families.
I say this is not my map, but I just think it's actually they could have passed that off as a Norman where areas of Norman settlement. It literally mirrors it.
It has been in the past.
Yeah. Is it? Okay. All right. Well. Okay. So we're on to the plantation. This is the final movement, mass movement. Actually, in recent times in Southern Ireland, we've had Poles and Lithuanians. So we've another new wave of humans arriving in our shores. But this in the 16th century, the plantation Ulster. So Ulster was the last stronghold. Gaelic Scotland would survive for maybe another 100 years, right up until maybe Culloden or the Highland clearances. It was a way of life that survived relative isolation since Roman times. Now, interestingly, the vestiges of the old Irish clan system survives among the travelling community. If you want to see what the clan system was like, look at the travelling community. Their DNA is literally, it's no different. I've looked at the DNA, I've seen the Y-DNA results. I told them they weren't any different, but they didn't like what I was telling them, so they just didn't. They just ignored it.
In the 14th century, where they should have heard.
That's it. But that's when the clan system is so. So the clan system is destroyed in Ireland. But if you're still holding on to that sort of wandering lifestyle, because actually I talked to a guy. I'm in Galway City, so Galway is a Norman town, and I asked the guy, local historian, I says, where were the Irish? Were they in the town? He says, no, they weren't allowed in the town. They had to camp outside on the road. That sounds familiar. But the surnames of the travelling community are all representative of a very small area. In my area, there's Wards and there's McDonoughs. You don't find that's because the Wards and McDonoughs, there's Joyces. But those surnames are all to Galway. So they're not actually, they're just moving around a very small area. And the surnames are always representative of the surnames in that area. So it's just a last little, it's the clan system, it's the Irish clan system that survived in the travelling community.
Argue we never had a class system like Scotland.
No, we didn't. Class system is very different in Scotland because anyone with the name could come to your aid. Ireland is a lot more hierarchical. We're very dynastic. If you fall off the sort of five, you're gone. You're gone. So okay, so now there's some striking things here. So I have to say the DNA tells me that our ancestors, and studying the surnames, our ancestors are just as pragmatic in the past as they were today. And about 20% of the Scots that settled in Ulster spoke Gaelic, because Galway is still a Gaelic-speaking area. And they were aware of their links to Ireland, because Mr. McClelland always, the guy, Norm McClelland from Arizona, Shamrock Foods, he always told me, he says, I knew my ancestors were Irish. We were earlier than the plantations. So that family lore had been kept in that family. And I know from living in Scotland that there's no love lost between the English and Scots. And they were fighting on the borders, on the borderlands of Scotland and England, way before they got to Ireland. So, and this is a great book. I love this book. I always go back to it as a resource. But if you go on. So, when you look at this, so this is, again, this isn't one of my maps. This is just, I've taken the surnames from the medieval map and I've put it on a map of the Catholic distribution. And it looks quite stark here. So, what's happened here? This is displacement. But this is just history repeating itself. Because if you think about it, the first farmers came in, there's no more hunter-gatherers. They were pushed. Well, actually, they were never very numerous. And actually, disease was probably brought, so they were probably wiped out. So the first farmers come in.
There is a bit of a genetic trace.
You reckon?
Yeah, well, recently,
I haven't picked it. I could.
3-4% now.
Well, I haven't seen it yet.
We've only got a couple of bones from settlers.
Yeah, but I haven't seen it yet so I deal with the living DNA. So people who are alive today. Unfortunately, look at ancient DNA, it's often bottleneck populations that just die out.
Yeah.
But the thing here is that first farmers come in and they replace the hunter-gatherers. The Brittonic Celts come in, they push the hunter-gatherers, or the first farmers west into where I find them on the river. Well, I find them all on the Shannon River estuary. They've been pushed west. Now the Gaels come in and they push the Brittonic Celts south, because as I said, there's parts of Ulster where I just don't find any Brittonic DNA in anybody who do send to me their DNA results. Now the Vikings is always an exception. The Vikings assimilated, the Normans in turn displaced the Irish, and then the plantation displaces the Gaelic Irish. So this is just, it's just that we see it in recorded history, or we experience it in recorded history, and then it's there to see. But in the past, it's just been forgotten. So if you click on next one. Now here's the interesting thing. This is the Down survey map. Now everything is online. It's absolutely amazing. My interest in this is I can go into this and I can, if I have an area, I can look and I can get an early reference to a surname in an area. And that's fascinating for me because that's what customers love. They love to see a surname in an area. But when I was looking at this map and I was looking at this, came across this one, the 1841 massacres. And what struck me was that this is areas where the English settled. These are, so Antrim or Armagh, and I think it's Cavan Monaghan. When I look at this map, the plantation map, these are areas where there is predominantly English surnames. There's Bowes, actually, English Bowes in this instance, not related to me. But this is English settlement. It's the English that have been targeted. As I say, the Scots weren't too keen on the English, and I think they just turned a blind eye when these massacres happened. But if you click on the other
Scottish invasion, plantation Presbyterian didn't happen until after 1641.
But this has another interesting implication, because I'll show you now in actually in the case study. If you click here. This is why Ulster is very interesting from my perspective. There's an unusual number of non-paternal events in Ulster-wide DNA results. That's when the surname does not match the Y DNA. Okay, so something's happened. So this is test subject more, and I'll have a look at his results. So if you look at his closest matches, they genetic distance of these are close matches. They're plantation surnames. They're Moores, they're Elliots, they're Harrisons. That's plantation. They're plantations. But if I look more distant genetic routes, it's Gaelic Irish. It's Rafferty's, it's Gallagher's, Sween, it's Donoghue, Kilcoyne, Kane, Slavin. Something's happened here. This is all plantation. This is Gaelic Irish. So recent plantation, distant Gaelic Irish. So if you click on the next one. So here's the Moor. Here's where his ancestors, his Moors are. Okay. And in the surrounding area, I find Hartleys, Harrisons, Elliots. These are his close matches. It's got some singular matches to it. A singular match to Adele and McGee. McGee is sort of ubiquitous. But in the surrounding area, you've also got all these Gaelic names. So something's happened. And it's happened about 400 years ago. And if you click on that. So when I did the analysis, he's right next to a Castle, Sanderson, Plantation, Vaughan. His ancestors, the Moors are all here, and he can go there, you can test these Moors, he'll get a DNA match, confirm the link. But his ancestor was Gaelic Irish, but he's acquired the Moor surname. So something's happened, and I'd say it's probably 1600s, a lot of orphans, they're just adopted into different families.
It's not an assassination. Does Moor represent
no,
Gaelic?
because no, well, Moor is one of those surnames where it can be O'Moore, but in this area I don't find Gaelic or Moors. Plus he has Elliots and Harrisons as close matches. So if you imagine there's a couple, so there's orphans in the area and they're just adopted into surrounding plantation families. Some are Harrisons, some are Moors, some are Elliots, and they all descendant-wise, 300 years later, they take a test, they see all these surnames. But deeper, earlier than 400 years ago, they were Gaelic Irish. It's just they've been orphaned, but raised in plantation families. And that's something, so when you come to me, if you're an American, Scots Irish, I don't know what's going to happen because there's this unusual number of these events. And that the reverse can happen as well, where you have an Irish surname, but it turns out your ancestors were actually plantation Scots or Anglo-Irish. So when you've got Ulster DNA, for me, it's quite exciting because it's unusual. If you go south, it's either Norman or Gaelic Irish. It can be a bit boring, but Ulster is it's interesting. So we click. So there you go. Mr. Moore's paternal ancestor was Gaelic Irish man, acquired plantation Moore son before the dates, as I could say, I can look at the distance and work out the dates, and it's 400 years ago. So you click again. So also in the map, so I showed this earlier. There's a lot of surnames where I can't find, in some areas where I can't find a sort of Scottish equivalent or an English equivalent. And they have to have been Gaelic Irish. And I've ruled everything out. And I've have them in green here. So Brennan, Adrian, McGinty. These guys have all just turned Protestant. Now, this is a sort of history I don't get in Southern Ireland. You know what I mean? It's completely different. This is a mini Reformation. But this is not an isolated instance, because if you click on the next one, again, there's this little clustering here. There's MacAleese there. So there is. So it's more complex. You know, as I say, it's a lot more interesting, and it's not what I expected. But it's just definitely a lot going on, and plantation is a lot more complex than we realize. So if you click on that. All right, so here's where I say surnames are my thing. So I think a lot of the Gaelic Irish bards were unemployed and they end up doing the paperwork for the new landlords. Because I see a lot of name changes, and it's only with the DNA I can make a connection. So Semple became Hempel, it's Ireland, it's Semple, because their DNA match each other. But I find Semple in Ireland, it's Hempel in Scotland, or Hempel in Ireland, Semple in Scotland. McCrindles are actually McReynolds. McReynolds from Southwest. So they're McCrindle in Scotland, become McReynolds in Irish. That's the Irish form of Ragnall or Reginald. Macharg became Maharg, and then the confusion comes that they're Grahames in disguise. They're not, because they all carry an M22 marker, and there's Macharg in Southwest Scotland. MacWhiter, Merryweather. Now, that was a number of years ago. But I'm pretty sure, yeah, Merryweathers, if you find your tree, they're probably MacWhiters originally. The Littles, now here's where it interests. These guys are all sort of border Scots area. And I say the Gaelic Irish or wherever recording them just is completely dumbfounded by these surnames, and they get changed completely. Little is Little, it becomes Little. And he's even Little now in Scotland. Hazelhope is Heaslip. And that's a place name. In Scotland, Roxburgh, Rosebery, Turnbulls. This one, Rippy, Redpath. They're Y-DNA matched to each other, but Rippy is only found in up near Strabane, I think it is. They're originally Redpaths, because if you look at their DNA, they match Redpaths, and all their DNA links back to Roxburgh, is it? So there's a lot of name changing going on. As a rule of thumb, the further you move away from your place of origin, the more chances the name's going to change. So if you click on next. So research. So I'm doing a Gaelic Irish version of these maps purely because there's a lot of redundancy in these surnames. And I've just down here, Ford, McNane, they're all the same thing. There's the same surname, but I'll have them on the map.
This is interesting. Sorry for interrupting. I have an ancestor who was married, and they had the four children. The four children of this woman. The woman was listed in 4 different ways, and she was short. McGuire, McCarr. Yeah. Just for some reason, she's documented differently.
I reckon once I convert these all to the original Gaelic versions, I'll have eliminated maybe 20% of the surnames on the map, and it'll be a lot clearer. And actually, this one is quite. I noticed this one on the way up. Trainer. They're all Creamer, McCran. They're all the same. Son of the strong man. Now this is interesting because I was watching this. Only Murders in the Building. I don't know if anybody's watched it. But he plays a producer in this who's 3/4 Irish and does a DNA test, and that got my interest. So I did a quick Google on him. He's actually from his ancestors are Shorts from Crossmaglen. And short means Mac on gear, is son of the short man. He's a tiny guy, he's probably smaller than me. So and they're always slagging him off in the TV program because he's short. And I was like, so Irish surnames. I always thought they were son of whatever it was. I didn't realize they can be descriptive as well. So Macangir, son of the short man. And actually you've got Shortstown down here. And Monagir. Now again, townlands, it's got gear in it. Is it Shorts, what is it, Bog? I don't know. Townlands are open to interpretation. So there's a lot of redundancy. So and probably in the Scottish one as well, where I'll have to go back and see, how all these surnames link in. So if you click on next one, nearly at the end. Oh, so language and DNA, terrible bedfellows. And say, I'm standing here, I'm speaking English. But my DNA says Brittonic Southern Celt, yeah? Southern Irish Brittonic Celt. My ancestors probably spoke something akin to Welsh. I'm glad I didn't have to learn that in school. But they did speak Gaelic at some point. So at some point, the Gaelic language, the language you know today becomes dominant. But I reckon my ancestors, they've come up through Britain into Scotland and into Ireland. And then before the modern Irish arrived, they were probably speaking something that was related to Welsh in some form. I don't know. But here's the interesting thing. Bowes, bow, a boy. These are the English earliest I can get them. So a boy. But there's also English and Scottish bows. I showed you one on one of the maps there. But that's one of those words that's remained remarkably consistent throughout thousands of years almost, because bow means cow or victorious, which like some words can have two meanings. Bua means victory. So today in modern Irish, goal of a boo is what they say in when I'm watching the soccer match. You can see that on the flags. It means victory to Galway. So if you click on, if you click again. Now, boy are the cattle people from Bohemia. Now, Bohemia is like, if you look even deeper into Y-DNA Celtic origins, Bohemia is a hotspot. And before that is the steppes of Russia, the Yamnaya. Okay. So if you click again, the boy give rise to Bologna. So they appear, these are all recorded by the Romans. So the boy recorded Romans in Bologna. They give their name to Bologna again. The boy, when Caesar's fighting the Gauls, the boy is one of the tribes he records that he's fighting against. So that bow is remarkably consistent through the language. And if you click again, you got Boudica, the victorious one, who defeats the Romans and then gets annihilated. So what does it mean for my surname? I'm either son of the cow, don't like that, or it's, if you click, grandson of the victorious one. That's probably the translation. So my answer at some point has earned a surname. I know it probably done something, it quickly fell off the sort of dynastic ladder. As soon as you go up there, he's off again. So now, this is research you're probably all familiar with. Now, Charles Bourne. Now I'm looking for, so I know that surnames can be descriptive in some form, based on Macangir, son of the short man. So if you click on again, so this is the area where Charles Bourne is from, Littlebridge. But this is the area, it's around here, isn't it?
His real name was O'Brien.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. So, so I'm looking at this area, I'm looking for something. Now I know as a scientist that your height is determined by your long bones in your legs, okay? That's where all the growth occurs from the long bones. So what's the Irish word for leg? Cush. There's a surname Cush in County Clare. It means leg. Now, if I look at the books, it goes Cush. That means he was the courier. What was just is another reference to legs. But in here, now these are interesting. If you look at this area here, there's some interesting surnames to reference. Now this is speculative. I'm looking for something here because I'm looking for descriptive surnames. Is there any here? This surname here, Cushnahan, Cushley, Cuskern, they're all unique to this area. I don't find them anywhere else in Ireland. Is there something in here? And did it at one stage relate to a descriptive term for the gigantism gene?
They're all Cushes as well. They're Cush, the name Cush is right here as well.
Cush, it's there. So there's something, there is, I know from my science, height is based on the leg bone. Are these the leggy guys, the tall guy? I don't know, but it's been so long that I'm speculating, but this is interesting because I only find these 3 surnames in that area, and this is the heartland of that mutation. So if you click on again, so I think this is my last slide. So I go back to research. So I'm interested in migration. Our ancestors were very pragmatic, okay? So when this is the Liberties, I know my ancestor before he ends up in the trenches, and he was from the Liberties, and I wanted to know where are these guys coming from. We got to the Liberties, but where did he come from? Was there any clues in all those surnames in that area? Because I know we sort of tend to migrate. We're creatures of habit. We follow a sort of. If you've got a cousin in New York, you'll end up going to New York. It's just easy. You've got connections. So I looked at all these surnames, and they're generally from either Longford Cavan, The Pale, Laois Offaly Westmead, or Wicklow. So basically, if you click again, they're literally, it's easier just to go here. Why go to New York when you can go to Dublin and then probably on to Liverpool? They're pragmatic. So if I go back to my classmates, they've all just come from here. They've all just they're not coming from anywhere else, they're all coming from the surrounding area. So our ancestors are pragmatic, it's the easiest path. You're not going to spend a fortune trying to get from here to New York, but you can just go to Dublin and get a job. So if you click on again. So my findings here. Now, I'll just summarize. I'd love to claim an Irish origin for Scots. I just don't see it in the Y-DNA. I just don't see it. There is a north-south divide in the Y-DNA results of Ireland. But if I read the folklore correct, it's always the Ulster folk battling the rest of us, isn't it? In the folklore for Cuchulainn, he's raiding there. They're based in Ulster. So there is that north-south divide in the Y-DNA. And there's also this Black Pig's Dyke. Now, there's not much of this remains, but this literally separates Ulster from the rest.
Well, a little bit.
Yeah, there's only fragments. I don't know if it was continuous, but
No.
now there could have been other. It could have been other uses like cattle trails or something like that. Yeah.
Stop cattle raiding.
Yeah. Now, as I say, the other surprising thing is that 20%, possibly more, Lowland Scots that settled in 1600 were descended from Irish Gaels who colonised southwest Scotland 500 years earlier. Now, I hadn't expected that. So each new wave of humans affects those that came before. But mainly our ancestors were just as pragmatic as we were today. And as I say, if you have Ulster DNA, there will be a surprise, or there's usually a surprise. But it can always be explained in the Y-DNA. So I think that's my last slide. And thank you. I hope I haven't gone over time. No? All right. You can throw stuff at me here.
Can I just say, Tyrone, myself being invited you here, and I'm delighted that you've revealed so much about who we are and where we're from. What a glorious mixture of people, genes and DNA we are. And I suppose in the northern part of Ireland, or Northern Ireland, whatever you want to call it, the lesson from tonight is we're just all the same.
Yeah. I think there's been so much movement back and forth. Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. But actually, our ancestors, it was easier to travel by sea than it was over land. So Scotland, you can see Scotland from Ireland, we're just traveling back and forth. It's just so much easier.
I just want to share something with people who read this before, but it's important in this context. I've been here, our secretary, a very diligent person, got an email from a lady in America who was tracing her ancestors, and they were McFarlanes with an E at the end. And she heard that she found out they were from a place called Eskra, and the biggest well-known place called that in this part of the world is up near Omagh. But in fact, it's a townland in this area. And that is in fact where they came from. And 3 brothers emigrated to the States and took part on the rebel side in the War of Independence. And after independence, they were whiskey producers, and they were small producers, and they took part in the Whiskey Rebellion, which is famous in the Pittsburgh area. And one of them was shot in the leg in the process of this happening at the governor's house. And his dying words were Osceola. And his people were from South Scotland, which just backs up what you've been saying to us all this evening. And again, it's an illustration for all the very same.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Her other ancestor was a McWilliams
All right.
from this area. So,
Yeah.
So well, so
Sometimes it's difficult to tell the surnames apart because there's a lot of surnames that are in Scotland and are in Ireland as well before plantations or anything like that. It's just that they've evolved from the same personal name. So you get, but that's where the DNA allows you to tell which is which. Yeah.
There's a lot of people do their DNA and either get a mistake or get straightened out.
Yeah. But it can always be
that's-
explained.
Yes,
Yeah.
and the Moore, did you determine who he actually was or what is the predominant?
He has a Scots-Irish background.
But the Y-DNA generally indicates by the predominance. The people here don't test.
Well, you don't need to
US.
test, because it doesn't really require people here to test because, your relatives are all gone abroad and they're testing, so they're just representing you. So
But there's less.
actually, for the maternal DNA,
There's less of a percentage of people test here.
oh yeah, definitely,
Than test
Definitely.
elsewhere because they want to find out. who
Yeah,
they are.
yeah.
We know who we are.
yeah,
We don't need,
yeah.
we think we don't need to know.
Or is that not skewing the results a bit because areas of high immigration?
Oh,
those are
well,
the cells getting
yeah.
tested, you know?
yeah, so my case studies, probably represented the Scots-Irish and the Irish Americans.
The diaspora there.
Yeah, well, but then again, I did get some customers from England, from
Sure.
Australia, Canada, and I could still work with the results. Actually, if you tested people in Ireland for the maternal DNA, then I wouldn't have to do all this work because I'd have a reference database of all these people who've tested in Ireland for the maternal DNA.
Yeah.
And you test, and you come to me and I go, oh, you just match this crowd here. So I don't have to do all this work. That's where it would really work, is if there was a reference database of maternal DNA in Ireland. Yeah, that would be, but
But
then,
the Y-DNA, generally you find that the dominant name that shows up in your DNA
Oh, yeah.
determines exactly who you are.
well, what 50%, so 50% of males who test today, now this is given a 1,000-year time frame, will be descended from their surname Adam. So I match other Bowes. I don't know these guys, but I share a common ancestor with them. And we're all descended from one guy who becomes Ubu, who lived about 1,000 years ago. The other 50% have acquired their surnames through adoptions or fostering. So, or maternal transfer of the surname in the state. So yeah, they're the guys that don't match their Y-DNA. Yeah, they don't match their surname.
But you didn't mention degeneracy.
Well, yeah. But that 50% rule is very consistent for every surname that's being studied. 50% will be descended from that Adam, surname Adam. The first guy to take that surname. 50% of males will have acquired the surname through a maternal transfer.
Just a few questions from people online. Wesley states one of the earliest Celtic archaeological sites was at, and forgive my Bohemian presentation, but it looks like Shekshevice. I've tested a cousin whose Y-DNA ancestors emigrated from there, and the haplogroup is RM269, and then there's a subgroup FTA29897.
That 269 is brought by the Yamnaya, those steppe crowd that come in, and they virtually almost replace the male population in Central Europe.
Origins of Celtic Ireland. Pat's just stating here, you pointed out Celtic movement through the Rhine Valley onward to Ireland. What about southern movement via the Iberian Peninsula? Where have you found that?
I don't get many Spaniards emailing me, unfortunately. So
not even Spanish Army.
And I don't think the Spanish, the way they have you ever seen Spanish names? They're just crazy the way they inherit them.
Yeah.
Actually, this method I use for doesn't work for the Norwegians because their surnames change each generation.
Yeah.
So there's no link with the surnames.
Right. And Welsh surnames.
Welsh is just a nightmare. There's so many Evans and Jones. I'm just looking at the map and Yeah, and their surnames are standardized later, they become later, yeah.
Very good question here. Bernie says, how much did the custom of fosterage affect your Y testing research?
Getting foster.
That's presuming that's what you're
Yeah.
talking about, yeah.
They didn't change their name.
Yeah, they didn't change, they usually went back,
Also.
yeah, yeah.
A very interesting one here from Joanne. Not a question, but your accent is remarkably that of Canadian youth.
All right. Well, I spent, I grew up in
If you
Dublin.
hadn't said you were from Dublin, I would have guessed you're from Youth. Yeah.
Well, from Dublin, went to Scotland and then to Galway, so I've got probably a mix of all three there.
So lots of just passing on their thanks for the talk, Tyrone, and
Okay.
really enjoyed it. So
Yeah, thank you.
Tyrone, can I ask you, how do you acquire your case studies? Is it volunteer, does somebody volunteer, or do you select a pool yourself, or how do you do your case studies?
Well, my customers email me, so actually I don't charge for looking at results because there's no guarantee I can work with them. So people email me, if I can work with the results, I'll say, well, okay, I'll work with them, and then they can decide where to do a case study. But if I can't work with them, I'll explain more.
And you make a living out of it?
Yeah, I do.
Well done,
Yeah.
Tyrone.
Tyrone, Marie, you would like to.
Okay, just question about the hospital group.
Yeah.
All my DNA results that I got from different, I only have one relative that had the same haplogroup as I have.
Is this your maternal DNA results?
The bottom done that, and when
Oh.
I was done with 23 in May, and they give me 6% Iberian.
Okay, I would say, so those ethnicity breakdowns are getting better. They start to fine tune them, they get better and better, but they can be very broad, so you get 20% Ireland and it just shows Ireland. I guess, and as I say, when I look at them, I'm looking to link your surname to each DNA location, so I think that the ethnicity percentages can be vague. You know, at the moment they're vague, they are getting better. Actually, at one point I had 1% Native American DNA. And that went, I don't know where that went, but it disappeared shortly after. I thought, hey, how did that happened? It's gone. They're always changing and tweaking it.
Just to back up what Marie is saying, I did watch a program one night, and I don't wish to, the fact that different Galway is relevant. There was a professor from Galicia who came to Galway, and he was sitting in a coffee shop on the footpath, and he was looking at all the people going past.
Oh, the dark colour, hair and eyes, yeah.
People look like.
Yeah. That's because the I have a guy I tested, he's a Martin, so one of the trading families. And then if you look down his DNA, he matches Martin, and then there's a Martinez.
So he actually found out.
Because of the trade.
There was a substantial link between Galway Street, because of its trade links with Northwest Spain.
I think Columbus stopped off in Galway before he travelled to the New World. He was looking for information, and he came across. So it was ventured to by Spanish. He was selling wine, actually wine. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Tyrone.
Thank you. Thank you.
We really enjoyed your talk, and when you have some new information to inform us with, we'll have you back again. without a doubt.
I usually publish any blog. I usually blog on my website. So all this stuff is from blogs that I've done over the last maybe 2 years during COVID. I've just put this stuff together. So if they're all the information is on the blog.